Joker FOLIE A DEUX is the sequel to the 2019 hit film Joker that went on to gross $1 billion at the box office, despite media attention at the time trying to say, oh my gosh, someone's gonna shoot up the theater when they go see this movie, they're gonna be incited to violence. It was a weird time for the media to be talking about it like that, and then other people to kind of like criticize the film almost as if they were taking that part to heart. Different thing. What is this movie about? Basically, it takes place 2 years after the events of the first film. Joker, Arthur Fleck, is in Arkham Asylum now. He's awaiting trial because the city of Gotham wants to give him the death penalty for his murders. That, you know, at the very least, one of them was televised. He's basically owned up to. And then you have his defense, Catherine Keener, trying to say, no, that was the work of like a split personality. Arthur is a, sweet but mentally ill man who needs help. So there's a court case now surrounding Arthur Fleck. But while that's happening, he meets an inmate at Arkham, played by Lady Gaga, named Lee Quinzel, short for Harleen. And they kind of spark up some kind of romantic relationship. She's a fan of him, a fan of Joker, and he finally has someone who likes him, enough to be in a romantic relationship, and they sing about it. And that's the gist. So a lot has been said about Joker 2, FOLIE A DEUX. I don't want to come in and be this like reactionary, like borderline like emotional by saying like they betrayed me. There's a lot of that going around. I also want to be honest about how I feel about it. I don't want to lean one way just so I can like own somebody. When it comes to like coming up with takes, what your opinion is, trying to express that, I just want people to know I'm not somebody who is trying to like take someone's experience away from them, but I with the hope of this, I do want to try to add a little bit of just a conversation about it. Just, let me just express how I feel about this movie and not be so exaggeratory one way or the other. Just let me just state how I feel about this movie because I feel a certain way about it. I do also want to bring up really quickly that the first film, this conversation surrounding that one when it came out was incredibly frustrating. I mentioned the media stuff in the beginning of this video, but then when it did come out, a lot of people swinging in different directions. You have people who are like, this is a masterpiece, this is one of the best comic book movies of all time, this is how it should be done, we need more of this specifically. And then you have people who are just like, I think it's a ripoff of Scorsese, and it's awful for doing so. It's actually an inherently, really bad film, and oh man, Joaquin Phoenix, he shouldn't get that Oscar, he's terrible, all around the board. And I'm just kind of like, I like that movie. I rewatched it also before seeing this new one, and I feel like my opinion of it is still the same, just I gave it a lower grade on like my Letterboxd. When it came out, I think I gave it an A-. Now it's kind of more B, but I didn't walk away going like, feeling drastically different. I was just kind of like, yeah, this is kind of exactly how I felt. I liked it, I admire a lot of it, and there's a lot of great technical craft on display. There's just some other parts where storytelling I think is a little sloppy, but it was exhausting to kind of try to talk about Joker and try to hear any like conversation, any kind of like nuanced conversations about it back then, because if you're, absorbed in the world of like film Twitter, you're gonna get a lot of that on your feed, and you can't just simply give up the app because it's been ingrained in your in your life. I can't just not look at Twitter. I need to know what's going on. It's a problem. But that first movie did go on to gross $1 billion. It got some Oscar nominations and some wins. So of course, in the new umbrella of Warner Brothers, they want a sequel, they want to do more of this, while they're also trying to start up their new DC, shared universe. They managed to convince Joaquin Phoenix to come back, which is something I never thought they could do just based off how Joaquin Phoenix is, but, he's here. Todd Phillips is also back. It's basically him and Scott Silver, same writing team from the last movie too, the same composer, same cinematographer, so a lot of the same people were convinced to come back. So it should seem like this should be like a surefire hit. Like they know what people want. They know they have a vision. People love that vision. Let's give them even more money to make it. And obviously, as you have seen with the weekend box office, it's not going as well. Cinema Score, Rotten Tomatoes, all the scores are down. People, and of course there are people who are just gonna like, hate monger, the grifter kind of channels that will, monetize, profit off of hate and getting people whipped up in a frenzy, whether it's valid or not. And mostly It's not. And once again, with all of these outside factors, I find myself just kind of in the middle of these exaggeratory opinions, but I'm a little bit more, I guess, negative on this experience than I was the first film. I actually, just to be completely specific, I found this very frustrating. It was a very frustrating experience of a movie. I walked out kind of going like, I'm not really sure how to feel. I don't think I liked it though. And I saw it Monday. I saw it at the special Monday IMAX early showing, and it's been a week since then. And that whole time, the movie hasn't left my mind. So that's something that I can give this movie. That even a movie I thought was decent or like a better watch, I'm still thinking about Joker a lot more than some of those other films. So it's there's that. It's something to think about, something you can have conversations with people. There's a lot to chew on. I think overall, though, despite the fact that I'm going over things in my head, I've seen other reviews, I've, seen the takes that pop up on Twitter, and I feel like most of the things I see, it's not things that I'm, inherently against, or, I'm getting angry at people's opinion. It's just no, I can't disagree. I agree, in fact, with maybe a point that you're bringing up, or I agree, in concept, you know what I mean? But I'm not really being swayed one way or the other. So I keep going over these things, and I'm talking about the movie to myself or with other people, and I'm just kind of still in the middle, you know what I mean? I'm not being budged one way or the other. Some say a rewatch might help that, but I think, the fact that I have been thinking about it so much, and I don't think I'm missing any details, you know what I mean? It's still pretty clear in my mind. I don't know how much that could help, because if I'm still just in the middle, unbudging, I feel like that'll just happen again. Maybe if you give this some space, a rewatch after a year or two, maybe. But as of right now, yeah, I'm just very frustrated. So let's just dive right in. I just want to get the musical number stuff out of the way first. There are a lot of people who are still surprised that it was a musical, or they didn't like what kind of musical it was, which is a lot of raspy singing, pitchy, in kind of imperfect voices with, the creepy ass Joker score kind of playing in some parts. Once again, it's a very frustrating thing for me because there's a charm to an imperfect voice, a character voice singing, and in fact, I think I prefer that more than back in the day when they'd have actors who would then be dubbed by real singers in musicals. I prefer having the real person do it, even if it's not amazing, because I like the honesty of their vocals, the emotion backing it, especially if it's with a really lush, beautiful, expressive arrangement, you know what I mean? That's part of the magic of musicals for me, is when you can have people who maybe aren't known for singing, and maybe they don't have the best voice, but you can give them a song and they're oh, that's quite good. So at first, I think there's a charm to the first song of the movie is For Once in My Life, which is sung by Joaquin Phoenix. I think there's a charm to the course of that song, kind of him finding his groove, and the music, picks up and it's more of a big band, lively tune instead of where it starts off. I kind of love that. I do think though, after that, ditch the raspy voice thing. There's a couple too many songs of just him or Lady Gaga, either just sitting down, just sitting in chairs, or walking down a hallway and they're doing that I'm singing kind of thing with the music, really minimizing the musicality. You can hear traces of oh, that's what it could have sounded like if it was a bigger thing, but it's mostly the just typical Joker, ominous kind of sounding score. There's a bit too much of that, and I feel if you're going to have this be a musical, I need you to really commit. I can't really have you do it well, we're trying to blend our style, our, realistic, dark style with this. Just have him finding his groove be the one time where his voice isn't great, and then everything else. Because when it goes into full fantasy stuff, the Bonnie and Cher kind of homage, there's a moment where Gaga's at the piano and Joker's kind of tap dancing. In certain full fantasy scenes like that, their voices are, in my opinion, excellent, you know what I mean? Perfect, sounds great. But there's so many other tracks where it's that high pitch, raspy, and it's you know what I mean? I think after the first song for both characters, because they both kind of have those, finding the groove kind of songs, after that, just go full fantasy and ditch imperfect vocals, because it creates just a better listening experience as well. I think you can bring it back near the end. Oh, sorry, I forgot to mention, this is full spoilers. This is full spoil. It'll be in the title. This is full spoilers, by the way. Click off if you haven't seen it. I think you can bring it back near the end, though, when he's like crying into the phone at Gaga, please come back, because that's when he's like emotionally really low. And you can have that. And you can also bring it back during the Gonna Build a Mountain reprise, because that's a fantasy taking place right after he got shanked several times. But it's not just the vocals. It's like there's certain ways they try to film it as well. Like I said, kind of trying to blend in, you know, homage to musicals, MGM musicals, classic musicals, with their own style that they've created for their drama last time. So when Joaquin starts singing the first time for Once in My Life, the camera's kind of like following him. It's like kind of here framing, you know, like we're on him and we're following him around like the room. But like he starts, like the music even builds in a way where you're like, yeah, he's dancing, and you see him doing like some kind of leg stuff. Like, you know, he's moving his legs. I don't know if he was tap dancing, but he was doing something with his wild thin ass legs. But the camera's like just on him, and it's like, man, I don't know how you missed the part where in so many musicals, especially these classic ones, which it seems like, you know, is one of the main inspirations, you pull back so you can take in everything. You can take in the scenery. So also later when they're doing like a dream sequence, kind of like waltz on a rooftop, they keep like cutting and you don't see the full dance, and they cut the song short as well. That's something they do too, that songs are cut short. And it's like, man, it seems like you want to do this, you want to commit, but you're still like trying to pull back. It's like, you're a little too committed to also not be committed, so it's just certain things like that kind of irk me. So once again, just frustrating. I didn't hate it, but I don't like love it. In fact, I've listened to a few of the tracks like a couple times because I do enjoy some of them, but then there's the other parts where I'm like, it's more than just like I don't like that one compared to this one. It's genuinely like I can't listen to it because it's unpleasant. But you gotta understand, I love musicals, so the fact that, you know, I am so conflicted, I'm not like sticking on like the hate side, you know, shouldn't surprise anyone. I mean, in general, I don't think it's something you can just like fully hate, because like I said, there is still some good stuff in there, but I do have like a personal liking for musicals. So either way, if you have a song in a movie, like the stupid fucking Holmes and Watson movie where randomly they have like a musical number for John C. Reilly and Will Ferrell. It's so stupid, it's out of nowhere, the movie's not a musical, so it's like, what is going on? But I love that scene just because they're singing, and I loved it. So it shouldn't come as a surprise that I do enjoy this, and that was one of the aspects that I was looking forward to the most about this movie. So that's why I was a little conflicted walking out, because I was like, I really wanted to love it based on that alone, and it's, you know, representative of the whole movie, I guess, just a mixed bag. So let's talk about the rest of the movie. I really love that it is kind of about this identity crisis that Arthur is having. Catherine Keener's trying to set up the case like, you know, this is a split personality that did this stuff. You know, Arthur can still be helped and treated, you know. And then the rest of the movie is kind of trying to grapple with what Arthur did in the last film, his identity crisis. Like, is it really like two separate things, or do I have to reckon with the fact that I did do those murders? You know what I mean? Like, sure, I called myself the Joker, but I mean, I did that stuff, you know what I mean? So I really love the identity crisis of it all, what it means to really be like an evil person, you know, especially in the position of Arthur Fleck when people are looking up to you, but that's not what the person that they are looking up to isn't you, but it's you know what I mean? Like, it's an interesting little dilemma, and especially when it comes to the relationship with Lee, played by Lady Gaga, who is good in the movie. They switch it up from some comic stuff, but she is basically like a super fan. She's like a lot of the other supporters that you saw at the end of the first Joker and some of the trailers for this. She's a super fan. I said spoilers, right? Yeah, spoilers. She has checked herself in. So when she meets Arthur the first time, she gives like a little lie about like, I'm an arsonist, I killed my family, and I've never done anything great, and I'm poor, or whatever. But then it's kind of later revealed like, oh no, she checked herself in. Her parents are still alive and very well to do. And she has her degree in psychiatry, which, you know, is from the comics. It turns out that she's just a really big super fan, and a lot of the songs that she sings, you get the vibe that she really loves more so just the Joker personality, what that means to her, but also how it can elevate her as well, since she's really insecure about how she hasn't done much in her life. So this kind of being like her easy way to the top, and you can see that reflected in a lot of the songs. Joaquin sings like these love songs, you know, Bewitched, For Once in My Life, you know what I mean? He sings about her, his love for her, and she sings about, you know, if my friends could see me now, or I'm got the world on a string, sitting on a rainbow. So she sings about her, while Joaquin also sings about her. So I really love that dynamic. I love how a lot of the movie is centered around that. I think the thing about Lee in this, though, is that she really should be like a co-lead, and she is more of like a supporting player in this. There's parts where they mention something she's done off screen, and I'm like, oh, I wish I could see that. I wish I could see more of just Gotham in general, and an easy way to do that is probably, I mean, you have some other supporting players you could do it through, but through Lee, you could really explore that as well. Because the thing about the first Joker is that it rarely, if ever, leaves Arthur's perspective, but he explores the city, and you see Thomas Wayne, you see all these other, you know, characters, and you get, even though they don't go into exact detail of all the minutia and everything, you know, you get the picture of what Gotham City is like, what the citizens are going through, and, you know, how they're going to react to all this stuff. And in this movie, you know, it's exactly the same as where they left off. He's got a bunch of violent, you know, supporters, you know, all in favor of him, and then you have, like, your Harvey Dent people, who is like, you know, this guy needs the death penalty. But it also, the world itself, it feels like in this one, where in the first one, you know, Arthur goes places, it feels like a city, it's grimy, it's gross. This one, it feels like the world is just the courtroom and Arkham Asylum. It feels very claustrophobic, you know, as far as like how Arthur's actions in the first movie have continued to affect the city and the people there. It feels very limited in what they reveal, and I feel like some of it is intentional, because you have like certain testimonials given by characters like Zazie Beetz is back, and Lee Gill, who Arthur didn't kill, but he let go out of his apartment, that character, he's back, and they give testimonials that kind of add something to like, yeah, these characters, you know, some people who saw Arthur's actions as like, yeah, they get what they fucking deserve. You have these other like tertiary characters who are like, that kind of fucked me up. You know what I mean? Like I live in fear, you know, I can't live my best life, I have anxiety, especially when they bring up the fact that in this world there is a TV movie, kind of similar to how they made true crime TV movies back in the day, that kind of only made things worse. And I feel like, you know, some of that is like good details being added, but then everything else, it just feels like everything is the same, and it's also kind of black and white. Like the supporters that Arthur has, you know, they're unwavering, but then when Joker, like later in the movie, and we'll talk more about the specifics of that later, is like, I'm just so tired, I can't do this anymore, you know, it was me, there's no split personality, you know, there's no Joker. Everyone is just like kind of immediately like, oh, fuck this guy, you know, I thought he was all about anarchy and shooting people in the fucking face. And I feel like a lot of the supporters, it must be more nuanced, you know what I mean? Like, in this specific case, like, he must have some supporters who are like Catherine Keener, who are like, well, he's mentally ill, you know, he can still be treated. It can't just all be anarchists, right? Because that's the reaction then, where he's then, you know, completely pushed away and all alone, is like, so all of his supporters just love the fact that he shot people? I don't know. Like, I think there's a more nuanced way to go about exploring that as well. And like I said, you can do that through the other characters like Harvey Dent or Catherine Keener, or Lee, who probably should get more, especially since she's in a romantic relationship with Joker, and it seems like that just, you know, kind of happens, you know what I mean? And I know she's obsessed with, she's a fan, but, you know, as far as like his, I don't know, it's just a little, I know he's never had anything, so like any shred, he's like, oh yeah, give me that shit, you know? But it still feel like, why specifically is she attracted to him, you know, before meeting him at that set? Like, what about his movement is speaking to her? And we don't see her parents. They make mention that her parents are well-to-do. She lives in the same apartment building that Joker did, I think they mentioned. She, you know, is near those stairs, so they can go back there. But there's still something missing, a kind of bite, a drive for that character. Very underwritten, I would say. Even though there's so much about the ideas of how they execute that that I like. And there's also like so many like theatrical things that happen, especially since this mostly takes place in a courtroom. And the thing about like court movies is that you can have some that like stick to like reality for the most part, and then every once in a while you'll have flourishes of Hollywood, like, well, we need some drama, and it's always like, okay, whatever. In this one though, it's a little ridiculous. There is a moment where like Catherine Keener's talking to press, and Lee just like jumps into the circle and is like, you're doing a bad job and you're gonna fuck this up for everybody. What the hell do you think you're doing? And when reporters are still there, basically just like Catherine Keener just responds back like, well, you think he's just gonna get out of there super easy? And just like leaves. And it's like, I don't think that's something like a lawyer would like say, basically like saying like, look, I'm trying my best to get this obviously guilty guy free of all charges and not getting the death penalty. You know what I mean? Like, maybe that's something you don't say in front of a bunch of reporters, but that's the theatrics of this movie, and especially when he's in the courtroom, and there's, the judge is even like, you know, because of a certain loophole, I guess there's no rule that says you can't dress up as Joker, and he just, there's one time where the judge is like, don't make a mockery of this courtroom, but he's constantly making a mockery of everything, and there's just nothing proceeds like a normal courtroom. And I feel like that would have been more interesting than just like giving free reign to Joaquin to do whatever if you have him confined to the rules of the courtroom. I don't know, man. Obviously it leads to like a great scene with Lee Gill, who genuinely is very great in his moment. It really steals, you know, the show from everyone for a bit. Even Joaquin, who's doing like this, you know, Southern gentleman kind of voice for a lot of it, which was funny. But then Lee Gill comes in with like a really raw, honest thing. And there is so much of this that is like a reaction to certain conversations surrounding the first movie, trying to be like a good companion, a good epilogue to that other film. And by adding in those testimonies, like I mentioned, is a really cool thing just to see the aftermath of it. I do think that the first Joker ends in a good way of, it's a little open-ended, like he's in Arkham and, you know, city's kind of in chaos, but then that's it. You know, that's the origin of this Joker. Is he even the true Joker because he's a little old? Who knows, but there's a lot of people who are crazy in support of him, so whatever. And then there's a lot of stuff that maybe, you know what it is? You know what it is that I couldn't really get past is that so much of what they do feels like it would be a good epilogue, like montage, like before Joaquin says the thing to a psychiatrist in the White Room, like, you know, I'm thinking of a joke, you wouldn't get it. Show that, you know, montage of him like in court then, you have these testimonies then, and you get more of an impact through that. This movie does, you know, for most sequels, I guess, you know, might run into the problem of trying not to feel like leftovers, you know, trying not to feel like it's reheated, you know, leftovers. Just like, you know, what's the point? What's the point of this? Can you justify your existence? And I feel like there's solid ideas here, but then when you get to the end of the movie, you take in the whole picture, it didn't really justify it for me. And there is a great idea as far as like being a reaction to the first movie, because there were people out there that were saying like, you know, oh, this, you know, this guy's cool. You know, I love when he, you know, stabbed those people and he shot Robert De Niro. You know what I mean? So basically making another film just to basically hammer home the point like, no, you misread it. This is a weak, pathetic, lonely, mediocre man who, you know, was failed by his family, his society, you know, like the world, like the city around him, you know what I mean? You know, this is not like a criminal mastermind. This is just a guy who's like wearily beat down and he snapped. You know, he's not a cool figure to idolize. So really hammering that point home, I don't think is inherently a bad idea. I just think, you know, I kind of got that. Like when I saw the first movie, you know, I already got like, yeah, this is, you know, this, you know, disturbed, you know, mentally ill man who just had his breaking point. Like I already got that. So much of this movie kind of being about, no, he is this, but I'm like, no, I already know that, you know. I think that's where a lot of the disconnect is coming from. It especially doesn't help that, you know, in the courtroom setting, they're recapping a lot of the first movie. And, you know, the testimony stuff with at least those two characters, Zazie Beetz and Lee Gill, you know, that's good. But then so much of it is just like Harvey Dent going up like, so you think basically, you know, he's the same guy and this was just always there, he's going to kill people? Okay, thanks. And then Catherine Keener going like, well, you can't really say that he's not a split personality, can you? I arrest. You know, stuff like that. And it's like, God, I need some momentum. And there is a point where the explosion happens in the courtroom. There's like one shot of it in the trailer. There's hints of it in the marketing. But there is an explosion that happens. And it precedes Joaquin at his lowest. He's rejected the Joker persona. And he's like, I'm just so tired. Lee has left the courtroom. But he's like calling her like, can you come back? And that's his song, If You Go Away. And there's like one scene of like Lady Gaga looking like she's reflecting on something. So when the explosion happened, I was like, she's getting him out, and basically in exchange for like basically setting him free, she's gonna force him to be the Joker for the rest of his life. Because to me, that's like way more tragic than just like, he's Arthur Fleck and he's this miserable, lonely man, like forcing him to be something that he's openly admitted, like, I can't do it, it's not me, I am tired. That's fucked up, and you know, I kind of like that idea. She didn't. it was just some random guys. He ran away from them. And the visual metaphor, of course, is that, he's running away from, the Joker, the, alter ego, like the guy dressed up like him. He's running away from that alter ego. But if the main point of that stretch, because after he runs away from them, he goes back to the Joker stairs and he's like, I'm here. And Lee's just like, I want nothing to do with you. That's entertainment. And basically dumps him, leaves him to get arrested again. The cops pull up. And I was like, if the point was just he is completely alone, I don't know if we need the explosion, the big theatrics, I feel like, and of course they take the opportunity to give Harvey Dent, not like the full Two-Face, but like some scratches, which is like, are you really fucking... This Harvey Dent has done nothing memorable or spectacular in this entire film, and you want to give him the Two-Face origin from this, and it doesn't even look that bad? Whatever. But if the whole point was just, he's rejected the Joker, persona, and now he's completely alone, Lee has left him, you kind of already did that. Like with her walking out, him giving the phone call and she's not answering or coming back, you could show his supporters like leaving the courtroom. They're not interested anymore. Maybe a couple stragglers. He also verbally says, I don't want to do it. So it's like, if the whole point was just the visual metaphor and to drive home the point even more that he's alone, I already got it. So it's just this unnecessary extra thing, which might be, as far as like my thoughts on it, kind of the whole movie. Especially when it ends with random guy. There's a random Arkham inmate with a kooky smile and he shanks the Joker several times. You betrayed me. You let me down. You were my hero. And that's implied to be the real Joker. He does the Heath Ledger. And then Joaquin, dies peacefully after getting shanked. And it's like, man, at a certain point, I love this idea that, Joaquin, is not the Joker, but he is now inspired like this maniac who's going to basically do everything that he like promised he would do, or he gave the illusion that he was going to do. I don't necessarily like that it was a random guy. And I know like the idea, like it could be anybody, any of his supporters, because he had a lot of them, especially in Arkham. But there was a character who was like kind of following him around. The guards were kind of messing with too, like tricking him into making out with Arthur for a bit. And I feel like that should have been the guy. Like you're already building some kind of connection there. But instead, what they have done is a different scene where Brandon Gleeson, who's good in this, a good little prick of a guard, he kills him in a rage. So you can't have that character doing that to Joaquin anymore because, well, we need that other beat. So we just have this random inmate. However, if you're going to have the big explosion and you want the visual metaphor of Arthur running away from the persona, have Harley Quinn kill him. I feel like that probably would have been, because like that's her like definitively going like, fuck you. She embodies the supporters that love him. And when he's like, I don't want to do this, she also embodies the rejection of him. So have her kill him instead of just some random guy. I know you don't have your, oh, that's the real Joker moment, but who gives a shit? So much of this movie is like anti-comic book, but even the last one is anti-comic book movie. It has like the names, and he has clown makeup on, but as far as like actually adapting any comic book stories, neither of these films do that. Some of the traits you find in the characters are not there, so they're already in their own realm. Why not just have Harley kill him then? And then there's still room for there to be another Joker and even another Harley Quinn, I don't know. I do want to also talk about the build-up to him rejecting it, because there's a point in this movie where it turns into a very miserable experience where this was another thing that I couldn't stop thinking about. Like, did they really do this? And did they have to do this? Once again, indicative of my experience with the whole thing. Did they have to do this? But basically, he's full Joker makeup. He's in the courtroom and he's fucking with everybody. And there's, you have the testimonies kind of like leaking in of like, talking about his psychosis and, how he's, his actions have messed people up. The Lee Gill thing is maybe the most emotional, and it seems like even though he's masking it under the Joker performance, it seems like that one got to him maybe a little bit. And then kind of after he goes on a bigger rant and he, calls the Arkham guards like these terrible people, whatever, he comes back, obviously, because, he's still in jail when he's on trial, and the guards start beating him. They're washing the face paint off, and they're like, let's beat this guy. And then they do the extra step of dragging him behind like a wall so you, the audience, cannot see what's about to happen. Brandon Gleeson, I think, even says the line, take his pants off, or take them off, something like that. You see shoes flung in the air. They cut, the next scene you see is him, like, Arthur, like, limp. And he's being dragged through the halls back to his cell. And it looks like, if I remember correctly, his pants are either off or they're just, like, around his ankles. Like, I remember that image, like, the shirt flap is only covering his ass. And even some prisoners are like, what did you do to him? And they fling him in, and he's just, like, this limp, lifeless little rag doll. And I was like, holy fucking shit. Did they just fucking imply, like, do what I think they just did? I mean, they didn't do it because they didn't show it, but they totally did that off screen, didn't they? They fucking sodomized this fucking guy. And I'm not sure how else to read that scene, you know what I mean? Like, how else am I supposed to read that? So that must have been what they were doing. And then, you know, that also follows, like, his friend that I was mentioning, who I think should have killed him if he's going to be in prison. He starts chanting, like, don't worry, Arthur, we're still with you, blah, blah, blah. And Brendan Gleeson's like, shut the fuck up, okay, get your ass out here. And then that's when he dies. He kills him, and one of the guards like, I think he's gone, man. And then in the very next scene, he's back in the courtroom, and he's like, guys, I can't fucking do this. I don't know if you need this sodomy. I think, you know, him hearing the testimonies and, you know, one of them getting to him a little bit, but he's still trying to mask it with, you know, his musical fantasies and you know, his laughing and joking, but then he gets beat. I think cut the sodomy out, and he, you know, they bring him back bruised. The one guy's like, we're still with you, Arthur. Maybe he's like, okay, yeah, you're still with me. And then Brandon Gleeson in a rage is like, shut the fuck up, and kills him. And then maybe he's like, oh, fuck. You know, like, oh, fuck, I'm getting more people killed. Cycle of violence. What am I doing? You know, that's, you know. Instead, when the guy gets killed, he's just, like, on the bed, like, laying limp because he just got fucking sodomized. And I don't... It's this extra thing that they added just for, like, cruelty's sake, like, just making this guy more miserable. All of the cruelty that Arthur got in the first movie, you know, it was building to his breaking point, and that's the point of the movie, right? His breaking point. What if society inflicted, you know, the Joker onto themselves, whatever. But in this movie, you know, they, you know, add a little bit more misery, which is like, okay, that's expected, but then it builds to a really miserable ending, and it's made even more miserable when you realize the, like, sexual violence that was just committed onto him, especially, like, considering part of his backstory is that he received physical and sexual abuse as a child. So I'm just like, what the fuck? You know what I mean? Like, why did they commit to that? I don't like that choice. You know what I mean? I don't think they justified that, you know, because if anything, something from his past coming back and happening again to him, I feel like would have triggered him even more to do Joker and get revenge. And I don't see it, man. I don't see why they needed to do that. So I think I've laid a pretty good case as far as, like, why I was frustrated with this. There's a lot of creative choices that I didn't really jive with, and then once you get to that abrupt finish, you don't get any other resolution with anyone else in the city, no reactions to him getting shanked, it just ends. I was just like, you know. But, you know, the cinematography still looks excellent, you know. The musical score combined with the, you know, musical arrangements for the singing, you know, incredible. It's still great. It's a lot of the same people, like I mentioned. The acting is still fantastic. Joaquin Phoenix obviously does an incredible job. Some people are even saying, like, he does even better than he did in the first movie, which was his Oscar winner. And I don't know, I think at that point I would need another rewatch just to catch. But, you know, he's still great. So who am I to argue completely? You know, Lady Gaga's good. A lot of the other supporting players, I mentioned Brandon Gleeson, Lee Gill, like I mentioned, has the scene-stealing moment, and Catherine Keener's a nice addition. It's just that, you know, you have these good movies, and there's even, like, some dark comedy insert, like, Joker, like, signing a book, and then he changes it halfway after the guard insults him, saying, like, I hope you get cancer and fucking die, or something like that. It was like, that's darkly, like, actually darkly funny. You know, a lot of, like, the practical work they do in creating, like, some of the sets for the fantasy sequences, costume design, and, like I've been saying, like, there's a lot of ideas that I really connected with and really liked in concept and some execution. It's just all of these other things are kind of mixed in, and it's like, it's not creating a cohesive piece for me. In a lot of ways, it's exactly how I felt about the first Joker, where I'm like, I'm liking a lot of these ideas in concept and some of these execution, but then you have these other things about the narrative, you know, some things involving the relationship with Zazie Beetz. I never bought it and was never, you know, blown away by the twist, or I never saw why he was doing it. Or like the Murray Franklin show, like how easily he got onto there with his gun and why they even wanted him there. How did a fucking camera in like the 70s, like one of those heavy ass cameras from the 70s, get his footage like it's a modern talk show and they're talking about, I don't know, you know, other things about it. So it's almost the same way I felt about the first movie, just on a bigger scale, because there's a little bit more going on. At the very least, you can say Todd Phillips is not really ripping off any other movies. He's not borrowing anything like he did Taxi Driver or King of Comedy. It's wholly its own thing. but I just don't know if I'm really into it. But this is not Todd Phillips' first go-around with like polarizing sequels to like popular first movies. The Hangover trilogy. Hangover 2 was basically criticized for being the same exact movie again, just different setting. But it made a lot of money. So we're making a third movie. And he was like, okay, you didn't like that it was the same thing again? All right, we're doing something wildly different. I mean, we're still going back to Vegas, but it's wildly different. It's like this dark comedy, like thriller almost, which people didn't know how to react to. Some people are like, I actually didn't enjoy that, you know? And it didn't make as much money. It still made money though. So it's Todd Phillips once again making a sequel that is like polarizing, and maybe it was decided to be that way because they didn't want to make any more. Joaquin has stated in interviews he can't really lose the weight again, like for his own health. So if that's kind of where things were looking before, like, okay, let's just end it here. We have this other DC stuff going on with James Gunn, and maybe we need to pull back on like Elseworlds stuff. You know, you already have the Batman, Matt Reeves, Penguin stuff. So this could be a good opportunity to get more money for coming back and then just fucking dip. We can slam dunk on, you know, so many people who expect this guy to turn into the Clown Prince of Crime, or people who really love this character and idolize him, or people who are just expecting like a satisfying narrative. We can slam dunk on them too. I'm frustrated. It's a frustrating experience. I will not rule out that potentially, maybe someday down the line, maybe I'll see the light. Maybe watching this movie will put a smile on my face. But it's a little too miserable to think about like watching again immediately. And, you know, just because of how I'm feeling for the reasons I have laid out here, you know, even like thinking about watching it again, you know, months, years from now, might be like, and I'm not somebody who's like averse to like these like sad, miserable, disturbing movies. Like one of my favorite watches recently was a movie called Eden Lake, directed by James Watkins. It's depraved, it's disturbing where it ends. It's kind of sad, and I loved it. it's what a film. And then also the 2022 film Speak No Evil, which they just remade and Americanized for Blumhouse. But that movie, I wouldn't say I love as much as Eden Lake, but that movie is also, it gets to a point where it's just so fucked up to watch. It's disturbing and vile, but it's all for the point of the movie. Like they justify it because the movie's about a certain thing, and I really enjoyed that. So I'm not averse to something that like makes me feel bad. I just don't think the execution really worked on Joker. I'm gonna give Joker FOLIE A DEUX a C+. If you love this thing, I don't want to take anything away from you. I know you're getting dogpiled right now because of the internet reaction to stuff. If you like completely hate this movie, I hope I laid a case for why maybe there's more to it than you might have thought when you initially watched it. I don't want to like veer into like reactionary territory and just like dismissing genuinely good qualities about it. So I hope I added something while also trying to, you know, let you guys know you're not, you're not like invalid for having these feelings. It's just, you know, maybe open your mind a little bit and just, you know, accept different things than just everything. Like we don't need like fans making their movies and getting exactly what they want. We need artists to come in with different takes, with something surprising, something you never knew you wanted, you know? So that's, I hope I'm giving you something to think about as far as like positives. But what did you think of Joker FOLIE A DEUX? Leave your thoughts in the comments down below. And as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.